The evening air carried the faint scent of salt from the ocean, drifting in through the open balcony doors of the sprawling mansion on Banana Island. Inside, the house was a monument of glass and marble, polished surfaces gleaming under soft amber lights, the silence heavy and watchful, like a cathedral. Madame Esther sat alone at the edge of a velvet armchair, her slender fingers curling around the rim of her teacup, though the tea had long gone cold. At 70, her beauty had not vanished. It had simply transformed. The years had painted her hair with elegant streaks of silver. Her cheekbones stood tall and proud, and her eyes, sharp and commanding, were softened only by a private sorrow no one else could name. She had raised her only son, Daniel, with everything wealth could offer, the best schools abroad, summers in Paris, tutors who polished his manners, and doctors who checked his every cough. Yet beneath the layers of privilege, she had tried to teach him humility, the value of kindness, the quiet strength of character. Now, as she sat in her lonely estate, she feared she had failed. Daniel had returned from London not just with a degree in finance, but with a new woman by his side, Anita, the fiancée, the future bride. She was stunning, elegant in the way of fashion magazines, her laughter smooth as champagne poured into crystal. And yet, there was something hollow in her gaze when she thought no one was watching. Esther had seen it too many times before, in boardrooms and social gatherings. That gleam of pride, the hunger for status, the quick calculation of self-interest. It gnawed at her. Daniel, blinded by love and youth, could not see it. He called Anita gentle, selfless, his angel. But Esther's instincts, honed by years of watching people play at loyalty in order to taste her fortune, whispered otherwise. So she devised a plan. It was reckless, perhaps foolish for a woman of her standing, but loneliness made her bold. If Anita loved her son truly, she would love him without knowing the weight of his mother's fortune. If Anita carried pride in her veins, it would spill when faced with someone who could give her nothing. That night, Esther rose from her armchair and stood before the tall glass window. Beyond the gates, Lagos glittered with restless lights, the hum of traffic faint in the distance. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, whispering to herself, for his sake, he must know the truth before it's too late. The following week, the transformation began. Gone were the silk gowns and diamonds. Esther tucked them away in cedar boxes, replacing them with plain cotton wrappers, worn shoes, and an old headscarf. A little makeup, carefully smudged, turned her into someone almost unrecognizable, her proud jawline shadowed with fatigue, her fine hands roughened with dust. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw Madame Esther, the billionaire matriarch of Banana Island. She saw someone else entirely, a woman who might mop the floors of her son's penthouse without ever raising her eyes. And so she became the janitor. On a humid morning thick with the smell of rain, Esther walked through the back entrance of Daniel's luxury apartment building. The staff barely noticed her. Lagos was full of women who looked like her disguise. She introduced herself simply as Mama Ruth, a widow looking for work. Within hours, she was assigned the lowly tasks no one else wanted: scrubbing tiles, polishing glass doors streaked with fingerprints, carrying buckets that splashed onto her faded slippers. It was there, on the polished white floor of the 12th floor corridor, that she first met Anita face to face. Anita stepped out of Daniel's apartment in a silk robe, her perfume sharp and expensive. She nearly bumped into Esther, who was kneeling with a rag in her hands. "Oh," Anita said, pausing. Her eyes swept over Esther the way one might glance at a broken piece of furniture. "Careful. Don't dirty the rug. It's imported." Her tone was clipped, casual, and entirely devoid of warmth. She didn't wait for a response before striding off down the hall, her slippers clicking. Esther's chest tightened. She pressed the rag harder against the floor, hiding the tremor in her hands. So this is how she looks at the poor. For the first time, Esther wondered whether her plan would uncover not just Anita's pride, but Daniel's blindness, and whether the truth, once revealed, would shatter her son's heart beyond repair. The days slipped by like slow rain on glass, each one thick with silence and hidden glances. Esther, still in her disguise as Mama Ruth, blended into the background of Daniel's glittering life. She carried buckets of soapy water, wiped counters that gleamed like mirrors, and swept the polished marble halls that never seemed to gather dust. Nobody asked her name again. Nobody cared. To them, she was invisible. Except she wasn't invisible to herself. Every time she bent her back to scrub a floor, she felt the sharp ache of irony. Her hands, which had once signed contracts worth millions, now clutched a frayed mop handle. Her shoes, which had once tapped across red carpets, now squeaked in damp corridors. But she bore it with quiet dignity. It was not the work that stung her. It was the way Anita looked at her. Anita's beauty was undeniable. She was statuesque, with smooth skin that caught the light and a voice that flowed like velvet. In public, she laughed brightly, her hand resting on Daniel's arm, her eyes full of feigned tenderness. But in private, when Daniel's back was turned, her smile withered. Esther noticed it in small, cutting moments. Once, as Esther carried a heavy bucket past the living room, she overheard Anita's sharp voice. "Daniel, do you really think we need her?" Anita said, pointing with her manicured nails toward the kitchen where Esther had just been. "She's so slow. I can call a proper cleaning service. These old women." She lowered her voice into a whisper sharp enough to cut. "They carry curses with them. You don't want that kind of energy in your home." Daniel had chuckled softly, the sound of a man too in love to weigh words carefully. "Anita, you worry too much. She's harmless. Besides, she reminds me of the women who worked in my mother's house when I was a boy. Leave her be." Anita sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh meant to remind him who controlled the air in the room. Esther, her heart thudding, gripped the bucket tighter. The water sloshed, spilling onto her slippers, but she didn't move. The words curses and old women settled heavy in her chest. She turned back toward the sink, hiding her trembling face from sight. One evening, Daniel had left for a late business meeting, and Esther remained in the apartment to tidy up the dining room. Anita wandered in, scrolling lazily on her phone, her eyes half-lidded. "Hey you," Anita said, without looking up. Esther lifted her head. "Ma, don't just stand there. Bring me some water. Cold. With ice." Esther obeyed quietly, her hands steady as she poured the water into a crystal glass. She set it gently on the table before Anita, who didn't even glance at her. Instead, Anita muttered, "People like you should be grateful for work. Do you know how many are begging outside on the streets? You're lucky Daniel lets you stay here. Don't get ideas above your place." Esther's throat burned. She wanted to speak, to say, "You know nothing of who I am. You know nothing of the sacrifices made so Daniel could stand tall today." But she stayed silent, because silence was her disguise. Instead, she bowed her head. "Yes, Ma." Anita smirked faintly, as though pleased by her submission. Later that night, when the city lights flickered like distant fireflies beyond the glass windows, Esther sat alone in the staff quarters, a tiny room at the edge of the building that smelled of detergent and rust. She untied her headscarf, letting her silver hair spill out in loose strands. Her reflection stared back at her from a cracked hand mirror. The disguise made her look small, ordinary, diminished. But her eyes, even rimmed with fatigue, carried the weight of a storm. For the first time since she began her charade, she felt the bite of doubt. Was she doing the right thing? Testing Anita this way, was it justice or cruelty? Was she protecting her son, or wounding him in ways he might never forgive? Her hands trembled as she whispered into the night air, "God, give me strength. Show me the truth before it destroys him." The hum of Lagos traffic rose faintly in the distance, and the rain began again, soft, persistent, washing the glass towers clean. But inside Esther's heart, nothing felt clean at all. Morning light drifted across the wide glass walls, filling Daniel's penthouse with a golden haze. The city below stirred awake. Honking cars, vendors calling out, the hum of Lagos rising like a restless sea. Inside, the quiet was broken only by the clinking of cutlery on porcelain. Daniel sat at the dining table, scrolling through his tablet, a half-finished plate of yam and eggs before him. Anita, dressed in silk the color of wine, leaned against the chair beside him, her laughter echoing too brightly for the hour. Esther moved silently, setting down a tray of fruit, her head bowed, her back straight. To Daniel, she was a shadow in the room. To Anita, she was a reminder of power. "Darling," Anita said, touching Daniel's shoulder, "have you thought about my suggestion? The property on Banana Island? It would be perfect for us. We can't keep living here. This place is small." Daniel looked up, amused. "Small? Anita, this apartment is bigger than most hotels. Anita's smile tightened. Exactly. Most hotels. Not all. You're not most people, Daniel. You're special. You should live in a place that shows it. Her eyes slid toward Esther, who stood in the corner polishing cutlery. And with the right kind of staff. Not relics from the past. Daniel chuckled softly, as though he hadn't noticed the venom laced in her words. Anita, she's fine. She reminds me of home. Stop worrying. But Esther noticed something Daniel missed. Anita's face, the way her smile vanished for half a heartbeat when she thought nobody was looking. Her eyes narrowed, not at Daniel, but at her, the disguised mother holding a spoon in trembling hands. Days turned into weeks. Daniel, caught in the whirlwind of his business, often came home late, his suit wrinkled, his eyes heavy. In those moments, Anita's patience thinned. One night, Esther lingered in the hallway near the bedroom, folding fresh linens. The door was ajar, and Anita's voice spilled out, sharp as glass. You're never here, Daniel. What's the point of being with a man who's married to his work? If you can't even give me time, at least give me what I ask. The house, the car, the status. I won't wait forever. Daniel's voice was low, weary. Anita, I'm doing this for us. Don't you see? I want to build something lasting. Not just by shiny things to impress neighbors. There was silence, then Anita's hiss. Lasting doesn't feed my needs. Love doesn't pay for luxury. Esther froze, her chest tightening. The words struck like knives, not because of what Anita said, but because of what Daniel didn't say. He stayed silent. He let her words settle, as though he couldn't see the storm gathering. Esther clutched the folded sheet tighter, whispering inside her heart, he's blind. My son is blind with love. Another day, another test. Anita had invited friends over for brunch. Women dressed in glittering fabrics, their nails long and painted, their laughter shrill. The table overflowed with pastries and champagne. Esther served them silently, her tray heavy with glasses. One of Anita's friends whispered loud enough to be heard. Why is she using someone like that? Look at her. She can barely carry the tray. Anita's lips curved into a smile. I keep her around for pity. Daniel doesn't like change. But soon, I'll fix that. The women laughed, sipping their champagne. Esther lowered her gaze, her face burning. The tray wobbled in her hands, but she steadied it. She walked back toward the kitchen, her steps echoing against the marble, her heart trembling. In that moment, she didn't feel like a billionaire mother in disguise. She felt like a mother abandoned in her own son's home, powerless to shield him from the truth. She leaned against the cool wall of the kitchen, her breath shallow. How much longer can I do this? She whispered. But in her heart, she knew, as long as it took. Because sometimes, a mother's love meant carrying the weight of silence until it shattered on its own. Rain fell against the wide windows, the city blurred behind streaks of water. Daniel sat alone in the living room, tie loosened, a glass of whiskey untouched at his side. He rubbed his forehead, the weight of unspoken arguments pressing against his temples. From the kitchen, faint sounds drifted, the clinking of plates, the soft hum of a voice. Esther moved quietly, her hands steady despite the storm inside her chest. Every day she had endured Anita's cutting words, her dismissive glances, her calculated cruelty. Every day, she had swallowed her pride, watching, waiting. But tonight, the threads of patience felt thin as spider silk. Anita entered, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. She wore a fitted dress shimmering with gold, as if she were preparing for a gala rather than an evening at home. Daniel, she said, her tone clipped, we need to talk. He looked up, weary. Not now, Anita. It's late. Her eyes narrowed. It's always late with you. You never listen. I've given you enough chances, but you're blind. If you don't give me what I ask, maybe I need to find someone who can. Daniel's jaw tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying I didn't agree to live like this. She gestured at the apartment, the untouched drink, even at him. All your talk of building something lasting. What about me? What about what I deserve? Silence spread, heavy as the storm outside. And then Esther stepped forward from the kitchen, her hands still damp from washing. Her voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. Enough. Both Daniel and Anita turned, startled. You don't speak to him that way, Esther said softly. Not when you claim to love him. Love doesn't demand palaces and cars. It doesn't humiliate others to shine brighter. Love sacrifices. Love waits. Anita let out a sharp laugh. And what would you know about love, old woman? You're just a cleaner. Stay in your place. Esther's eyes glistened, but she didn't waver. She stepped closer, each word quiet yet unshakable. My place, she said, has always been by his side. Long before you walked in with your painted smile. Daniel frowned, confusion flashing across his face. What are you talking about? Esther turned to him then, her heart pounding. Her disguise, her silence, the test, it all weighed on her shoulders. She reached for her scarf, slowly removing it. The lines of her face, the strength in her eyes, revealed themselves under the kitchen light. Daniel's breath caught. His glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Mother? Yes. Her voice broke, tears sliding down her cheeks. It's me. I wanted to see her heart, to see if she was worthy of you. And now you know. Daniel stood frozen, his chest heaving. The pieces fell together, the long silences, the watchful eyes, the unspoken pain. Anita's face paled. This is ridiculous. Daniel, she's lying. But Daniel raised his hand. His eyes, once soft with love, hardened as he turned to Anita. I heard enough, he said quietly. I ignored the signs. But she saw them. And she was right. Anita's voice faltered. Daniel, please. Leave. The word cut through the storm, final and sharp. Anita's mouth opened, then closed. With one last glare at Esther, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, the echo of her heels fading into the night. Silence lingered. Only the rain remained, steady against the glass. Daniel turned to his mother, his throat tight. Why didn't you tell me? Why hide? Esther's lips trembled into a smile, fragile and tender. Because you had to see it for yourself. Sometimes love blinds us. Sometimes a mother has to open her child's eyes, even if it breaks her heart. He stepped forward then, his arms wrapping around her. For a moment, he was no billionaire, no man of power, only a son held against the warmth of a mother's embrace. I'm sorry, he whispered, for not seeing you, for not inviting you in, for forgetting who I am without you. Esther closed her eyes, tears mingling with his on her shoulder. Now you remember. And that is enough. Days later, the apartment felt lighter. The storm had passed. Daniel walked beside his mother through the garden of her old estate, the one she had once ruled in silence and wealth. She no longer needed the disguise. She walked freely, her head high, her son at her side. The future was uncertain, but love was steady. And in the golden hush of evening, as the city's noise softened into distance, Daniel realized something he had almost lost. Family wasn't about appearances. It wasn't about wealth or charm. It was about the quiet presence of someone who stood by you, even in disguise, even in silence. Someone who loved you enough to test the truth and loved you still when it broke.